It's Sarah, and welcome to my crochet channel. Today's video, I'm going to show you how to crochet my mini elf hat and take the mini elf hat and make it into a Santa hat as well. Now, these are used for decorations. You can stand them up and add them to your arrangements. You can put a string or a ornament hook and hang them on your tree. Now, they measure about 5 inches tall and about 4 inches at the widest part. So it doesn't take very much yarn either, and you can use up some of your yarn scraps and make lots of different colors. This is a free crochet pattern on my blog, and as always, you can find that link down in the notes underneath this video. To make an elf or Santa hat, you're going to need some yarns. And the pattern calls for medium weight number 4 yarns. You can use acrylic, cotton, or cotton blends, or wool, or whatever you have on hand that's a medium number 4 yarn. I'm going to be making my hat like this one, and then I'm going to explain to you how to do the Santa hat as well. I'm going to be making the hat portion where this one is green in this light pink. I'm going to make the stripe in this purple, and then I'll make the leaf in yellow like I have on this one. All of these yarns are acrylic yarn, medium number 4. The pink and yellow are Red Heart Super Saver, and this purple one is a sparkle yarn that I had on hand. I believe it is a Red Heart with Love sparkle or metallic. I don't have my labels anymore because I just got into my leftover yarns and found some colors I thought would look great together. We're going to be stitching today with an H hook, 5.0 millimeter crochet hook. You're going to need a needle to weave in your ends and your scissors. And then the other thing you're going to need is a stitch marker. Now, this is just your regular old stitch marker. You can use a safety pin, a paper clip, or just another piece of yarn to mark your rows, because the top of the hat is stitched in the round, and then we go to rounds that join when we get to the striped part. But the top portion is stitched in the round, and we're going to need to mark our rows with a stitch marker. All right, let's get started. We're going to begin with our main color. We'll make our slip knot, and we'll chain 2. Now, I have my stitch marker right here handy so I can mark my rows. We're going to begin by stitching 4 single crochets in the second chain from the hook. 1, 2. We'll go in that second chain, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull that loop through both loops. There's 1, 2, 3, and 4. Now I'm going to mark my last stitch with my stitch marker. There we go. And that's row 1. Now, we're not going to be joining. We're going to just continue to stitch in the next stitch. That's why it's called stitching in the round or continuous rounds. For row 2, we're going to place 1 single crochet in the next stitch. So we'll go right in that first stitch and stitch 1 single crochet. Then in the next stitch, we're going to stitch 2. So we'll stitch 2. Whoops, let me get my hook back in my loop there. There we go. We'll stitch 2 single crochets in this next stitch. 1 and 2. And then we're going to repeat that. 1 single crochet in the next, and then our last stitch. So I'm going to go ahead and move my stitch marker out of the way. I'm going to stitch my 2 single crochets, 1 and 2, and I'm going to mark my last stitch of that row with my stitch marker. All right, so row 1 had 4 single crochets. Row 2 has 6. And again, we don't join. For row 3, we just start stitching in that next stitch. 1 single crochet in the next stitch, 2 single crochets in the next. And it's kind of tight here, so you'll have to watch what you're doing closely. 1 and 2. 1 single crochet in the next 2. 2 single crochets in the next, 1 and 2, and we'll end with 1 single crochet in the next stitch. And then we'll go ahead and mark our row. For row 3, you should have 8 single crochets. Now we're going to take our little hat and flip it out. And now we're going to be working around this way. And I'm going to take that inside piece that we need to weave in, and I'm just going to stuff it down inside to get it out of the way. When we're all done with our hat, we'll come back and weave that end in. All right, now my stitch marker's on the wrong side of my hook. Move that over. There we go. For row 4, we're going to stitch 1 single crochet in the next 3 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to stitch 2 single crochets in the next. 1 and 2. Then we'll stitch 1 single crochet in the next 3. 1, 2, 3, and that brings us to our last stitch. So I'm going to pull out my stitch marker and stitch 2 single crochets in that last stitch. 1 and 2. And so for row 4, we have 10 single crochets. I'm going to put my stitch marker back in. All right, let's do row 5. We're going to place 1 single crochet in the next 2 stitches, 1 and 2. Then we'll stitch 2 single crochets in the next, 3 and 4. Then we'll stitch 1 in the next 2, 5 and 6. Then we'll stitch 2 in the next, 7 and 8. 1 in the next 2, 1, 2, then 2 in the next, and this will bring us to 11 and 12. And then our last stitch, we're going to stitch 1 single crochet in that last stitch for row 5, and that's going to give us 13 single crochets. And let me get my stitch marker in my last stitch. And so for row 5, we have 13 single crochets, and you can see how we're gradually making the top of our hat wider to form that little point at the top of our hat. And whether you're making the Santa hat or the elf hat, these rows at the beginning are stitched the same. We're going to place 1 single crochet in the next 3 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, then we'll place 2 single crochets in the next stitch, and then we'll repeat that. 1, 2, 3, 1 in each of the next 3, and then 2 single crochets in the next, 1 and 2. Then we'll stitch 1 in each of the next 3, 1, 2, 3, 2 single crochets in the next, 1 and 2, and then we'll take our stitch marker out and stitch 1 single crochet in the next stitch, and that's going to give us 16 single crochets. And I'm going to put my stitch marker right back in. For row 6, we have 16 single crochets. Row 7, we're going to begin with stitching 1 single crochet in the next 3. 1, 2, 3, and then we'll stitch 2 single crochets in the next. There we go. 1 and 2. And then we'll repeat that. 1 single crochet in the next 3. 1, 2, 3. Then 2 in the next. 1 and 2. And repeat. 1, 2, 3. I have a knot that keeps chasing me in my yarn there. Alright, and 2 single crochets in the next, and then we'll repeat that one more time. 1 single crochet in the next 3. 1, 2, 3, and then that brings us to our last stitch, and we'll stitch 2 single crochets in that last stitch of row 7. And that gives us 20 single crochets. So we're going to put our stitch marker in our last stitch. There we go. And now we can do row 8. Row 8, we're going to stitch 1 single crochet in the next 4 stitches. So 1, 2, 3, and 4. And 2 single crochets in the next stitch. 1 and 2. And then we're going to repeat that. 1 single crochet in the next 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And 2 single crochets in the next single crochet. 1 and 2. And then we'll repeat that again. 1 single crochet in the next 4. 2, 3, and 4. And 2 single crochets in the next. 1 and 2. Then we'll repeat it one more time. 1 single crochet in the next 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. We'll take our stitch marker out and stitch 2 single crochets in that last stitch. 1 and 2. And for row 8, you should have 24 single crochets now. Alright, so now we have just one more row of increases. And it's similar to the last one. The only difference is we're going to stitch 5 and then do our 2. So we'll stitch 1 single crochet in the next 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 2 single crochets in the next stitch. 1 and 2. And now we'll repeat that. 1 single crochet in the next 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and 2 in the next. 1 and 2, and repeat. 1 single crochet in the next 5. There's 2, 3, 4, 5, and 2 in the next. 1 and 2. And then we'll repeat that one last time. 1 single crochet in the next 5. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Take out my stitch marker and stitch 2 single crochets in that last stitch. And this is going to give us 28 single crochets. And that's how many you should have at row 9, is 28 single crochets. Let me put my stitch marker back in. There we go. And see the top of that hat? And again, this is still the same whether you're doing the Santa or the elf hat. At row 9, you should have 28 single crochets. Now, for row 10, we're just going to stitch 1 single crochet in each of the single crochets around. No more increasing, and from here on out, our stitch count on every row will be 28 single crochets. Alrighty, so I'm stitching 1 single crochet in each of the single crochets around till I get back over to my stitch marker. I stitched 1 single crochet in each stitch around. You should have 28 single crochets for this row and for every row for the remainder of the hat. Now, if you're making the elf hat, you're going to need to repeat this for 3 more rows. 1 single crochet in each single crochet around for 3 more rows if you're making the elf hat. If you're making the Santa hat, you're going to repeat it for 6 more rows because you're not going to be adding the stripe up here. You're basically putting it down here. So for the elf hat, repeat for 3 more rows. For the Santa hat, repeat for 6 more rows. 1 single crochet in each single crochet around. I have stitched those additional 3 rows. Here's my stitch marker moved up. And what we're going to do is we're going to be switching from stitching in the round to stitching around. And what that means is we're not going to be doing continuous rounds anymore. When we add in our stripe, we're going to be joining because we're going to be stitching half double crochets. Now, whether you're making the Santa or the elf hat, now remember, the Santa hat had an additional 6 rows and the elf hat only had an additional 3. But whether you're doing either hat, this next row is the same for adding those 2 rows of half double crochets. So what you're going to do is you're going to slip stitch in the next stitch. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and take out my stitch marker just to get it out of the way. We're going to join in our color we're using for our stripe. So with the Santa hat, you'll probably be using white, but it doesn't matter if you don't. Remember, you can do it however you want to. We're going to chain 2, and you'll notice I'm going to go ahead and leave my pink yarn, and that's because on the elf hat, we come back in with our main color. Now, on the Santa hat, because you're not coming back in, you're just doing this row, you can go ahead and tie off your red yarn. All right, so what we're going to do is our chain 2 counts as our first stitch, so we'll go into the next stitch and stitch a half double crochet. And the way you stitch, let me get my strings out of the way there. The way you stitch that is yarn over, go in, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull that loop through all 3 of those loops. And so what we're going to do is stitch 1 half double crochet in each of the stitches around, and that goes for if you're doing the elf or the Santa hat. The band on the Santa hat is made by stitching those 2 rows of half double crochets. Yarn over, go in, pull up a loop, yarn over, go through all 3 loops. 1 half double crochet in each of the single crochets around. So I finished that row of half double crochets. I'm going to join to the top of that chain 2 that counted as our first half double crochet with a slip stitch and chain 2. And I'm going to repeat what I just did. 1 half double crochet in each of the stitches around. And this gives us our second row of half double crochets. 1 half double crochet in each half double crochet around. And again, our stitch count is still 28 stitches because we haven't added or subtracted any stitches. I completed that second row of half double crochets. I'm going to join to the chain 2 with a slip stitch, and I'm going to cut my yarn. Now, if you made the Santa hat, all you have to do now is just weave in your end and you're done. And when we get finished with our elf hat, I'm going to show you how to make the little leaf and the pom-pom. All right, but if you're making the elf hat, we have 3 more rows of single crochet to do. So we'll bring our pink yarn back in. We'll stitch right in that first stitch and stitch a single crochet, and then we'll stitch 1 single crochet in each of those half double crochets around. I stitched that row of single crochet. I'm going to join to my first single crochet, chain 1, and then stitch 2 more rows of single crochets. Just stitching 1 single crochet in each single crochet around for 2 more rows. I've completed that third row, so I have 3 rows of single crochet. I join to my first single crochet. I'm going to cut my yarn and tie that off. So I'm going to go behind and pull that loop to the inside. And then I'll take my needle and weave that in. And also I'm going to weave in the string where we started on the inside of my hat. And next I'm going to show you how to make the little leaf that's on our elf hat. Super easy. And then I'll also show you how to make just a cute little loopy pom-pom that you can add to your Santa hat. To make the leaf, we're going to begin with our slip knot, and then we're going to chain 7 chains. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. We're going to place a single crochet in the second and third chain. We're going to stitch a half double crochet in the next 2. There we go. And then a single crochet in the last 2. 1 and 2. Now we're going to turn and work back down the chain. So we'll stitch a single crochet in the next 2. There's 1 and 2. We'll stitch a half double crochet in the next 2. 1 and 2. Then we'll stitch a single crochet in the last 2. 1 and 2. We'll join to that first single crochet with a slip stitch, and then we'll cut our yarn. And we're going to leave ourselves a little bit of yarn so we can sew that onto our hat. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and just tie that off. And first we're going to weave in the small end where we started, and we'll just weave that into the back. There we go. Clip that string. And now we can use the long tail that we left to sew it onto our hat. Now, whatever colors you want to use is totally fine. I just went ahead and did yellow because I thought it looked good with the pink and purple. You can use whatever colors, green, purple, whatever that you want to. Alright, now I put the leaf on just a little bit crooked, and I go down in, and then I come right back up. So I want to make sure that end's going to hold. And I don't sew the sides of the leaf. I only go right up the center of the leaf. So I'm going to come up and just go in and out these stitches. And make sure you don't go through both thicknesses if you want to use it as a stand-up decoration. All right, so I'm just going to pull that through. I'm going to pull this up just a little, go in that stitch, and then just go right back down and stitch that on. And the reason I do it that way is I want it to look just a little bit 3D so it can stick up. All right, so now I'm just going to pull that to the inside. We'll have to weave that in a little bit, make sure it's going to stay put. I don't want to lose our little decorative leaf there. Alrighty. Alright, see, so now you can kind of push that leaf up so it looks a little bit 3D. But it's up to you how you want to add that leaf on. Alright, so there is our elf hats. I'm just going to use this yellow yarn and show you real quick how to make a pom-pom, and then I'll add it to my elf hat, because elves like pom-poms too sometimes. So I take my 2 fingers and I wrap that yarn around 3 or 4, maybe 5 times. Not a lot, because you don't want it to be real thick. Alright, we're going to cut that off. We're going to lay that right across there. And we're going to snug that down real tight. I'm going to pull it just to make sure it's in the center. There we go. Because we're not going to be trimming this. We're going to leave it as loops. And you know I always like to tie 3 knots. Now I will trim this one that's sticking out that's a little bit long. So we'll just clip that so it blends in a little better. Alright, so let's go ahead and put it on this hat here. Alright, so I'm going to put my hook up through. I'm going to grab just one of those. Then I'll put my hook up through again next to it. There we go, and pull that to the inside. Then we'll flip it out and we'll tie a knot. And make sure you snug that down tight. You don't want your pom-pom to flop around. And I'm just going to tie a second one just to make sure it's going to stay put. There we go. I'm going to push down that a little more. There we go. And then you just kind of separate those loops so you have a nice loopy pom-pom. So here are our elf and Santa hats, and you can see you can make them in lots of different colors and varieties. You can make an elf hat, you can make a Santa hat with a little pom-pom, you can make an elf hat that's a little bit girly and add a little pom-pom. So there's lots of ways you can use this pattern and lots of ways you can use it in your holiday decorations.